to record. And Josh, it's to you.
Oh, thank you. Again, my name is Josh. My pronouns are he, him, his. I'm the president of the Astronomy Club. As you can see by the poster on the screen, tonight's going to be going over how to be an astronaut. Our next start party after this is going to be on the 4th Tuesday of this month, which is, if I remember correctly, the 26th, and that one will be on the evolution of telescopes. So keep an eye out for registration links for that start party as well. Without further ado, I'll hand it off to our presenter tonight.
All right. So, this is Dominic, pronouns he, him, his. I'm presenting how to become an astronaut. And so, with the recent announcement that the first humans are going to be launched from American soil into space on May 27th by SpaceX, I decided that for this last start party, before that, well, I guess the next one isn't, but we would talk about how the astronauts being launched into space got to where they are. So, some basic NASA astronaut selection history. The first 7 American astronauts were selected in 1959. These people were nicknamed the Mercury after the Mercury capsule that they would be going into space with. These were the first humans to fly cross-country at supersonic speeds. John Glenn was the first person to orbit the Earth, the first American to orbit the Earth. He also is the oldest human to ever go to space at an age of 77. He did that in 1998 when he was a U.S. Senator for Ohio on board STS 175. No, 75. My bad. So moving on. Since 1959, there have been 21 candidate groups to complete astronaut training. There is currently a 22nd candidate group in the works. Those first 21 candidate groups were up of 281 astronauts, varying ages, genders, races. So the space has pretty well represented. One thing we will be talking about towards the end are commercial astronauts, which are very different than astronauts, and I'll explain that a little later. So, the basic requirements to be an astronaut is mainly you have to be a U.S. citizen to be a NASA astronaut. And most of the countries that have astronaut programs, that is one of the requirements is for you to be a citizen of that country. The second requirement that stops most people from applying is that you have to have a master's degree in either engineering, mathematics, or some sort of computer, physical, or biological science, whether that's like zoology, physics, chemistry, whatever. And then after you receive your master's degree, you have to have 2 years of professional experience. So whether that's like working for SpaceX, if you somehow got a job as like a professor or a researcher, that counts. And then instead of those 2 years of experience, you could also have 1,000 hours as a pilot in command of a jet aircraft. And that harkens back to when most were active duty military personnel. And when you're someone in the military, you don't tend to have professional experience. So NASA decided to make it either professional experience or being a pilot for a jet aircraft. And that also has to do with being able to fly the space shuttle and that sort of thing. NASA always also has their flight astronaut physical, which you have to pass. And that's a very rigorous physical, as being in space requires you to do a lot of exercise and can be very physically and mentally taxing. And then obviously, just like most other jobs, you have to have good leadership, teamwork, and communication skills. So the reason there was an asterisk on that last page at master's requirements is because NASA does offer a few alternatives to having a master's degree. The first one is you can have put in 2 years towards a doctorate in one of the engineering, math, or fields listed on the previous slide. Now, they have specific requirements depending on whether you're doing your doctorate at a quarter system school or a sister system school. It's like 36 quarter hours for a semester and 54 for the quarter system. This option or alternative to having a master's degree is if you have a doctorate in medicine or osteopathic medicine. Usually doctors don't have masters, and it's always important to have someone like on the International Space Station or in the shuttle when we're still doing that, or just in general in space, to have someone who can help with any emergency medical needs. And then another thing that harkens back to the old way of needing pilots to go up to space and military personnel is the last alternative is having completed a nationally recognized test pilot school. So whether that's the Navy's test pilot school, the Air Force's test pilot school, or any other sort of commercial or civilian test pilot school, if you've completed it, it's nationally recognized, then you are qualified to be a NASA astronaut. So what happens if you get in? Well, if you do get in, you should already feel lucky, considering that in 2016, there were over 18,000 applicants for the 21st candidate group. And of those, less than 15 people got accepted. So as you can see right there, there's 13 candidates. So that's group 21. 2 of those people are actually Canadian astronauts. Right there in the middle and in the top right are the 2 Canadian astronauts. You can see the CSA logo. And that's because Canada's astronaut program is so small, and they also have such close with us. We let them come and train with us whenever they want to train astronauts. So yeah, but then after you get in, you can have up to 2 years of training, like minimum, before you ever get to go to space. And so we'll go over some of the cooler, more popular aspects of training in the next couple slides. But the main part of their training is actually classwork. So as an astronaut, you need to know all kinds of physics and chemistry, basics in medicine, that sort of thing, so that if something goes wrong up in space, you have the know-how to fix it. Another aspect of their training is actually linguistics training. So because when we're up in space, we're usually on the International Space Station with usually Russians, all astronauts know a little Russian, and that's part of their training is to learn Russian. They don't become fluent in Russian. They just have to have passing Russian. I personally suspect that pretty soon, part of training will also be to learn Mandarin with the Chinese increase in their investment in space recently. All right. And so another main part of their training is in a facility, the Precision Air Bearing Floor. And so basically, this facility allows the astronaut candidates to practice moving large objects. And so it does this by creating an airflow underneath the object between it and the floor, reducing the friction greatly and letting the astronauts push the objects around. And the reason this is necessary is because when you're up in space, there are oftentimes astronauts will have to go out on spacewalks and move around massive objects. And now microgravity allows them to be able to push things really easily. However, it makes it much, much harder for them to stop it. So if they have practice stopping it, it'll get much easier and much safer when they go out of space. So, and also, there's not a whole lot you can do to train for microgravity, but the two main ways NASA trains their astronauts to experience microgravity is with a KC-135 plane. Basically what that does is it'll fly in sort of like a wave, sort of like this. And then when the plane is flying downwards, the astronaut candidates and everyone on board sort of feel a microgravity because they're basically falling at the same speed as the plane. And so they just kind of float around in the cabin and they can get experience, with that feeling. And then the other form they do is the neutral buoyancy laboratory. And this is basically just a giant swimming pool. This pool is over 40 feet deep and it's over 2 square feet in surface area. It holds 6.2 million gallons of water. And within the pool resides almost an entire full of the International Space Station, as well as other modules such as like Soul module and Japanese hardware. In the past, there have also been like space shuttle stuff and Hubble telescope parts for us to practice on. However, those have since been removed due to them not being needed anymore with the retirement of the space shuttle. And so the only downside to the pool is when the astronauts are in there, there's a lot of drag due to the water. But like I said, this is the closest thing they can get to actually being up there and working on with actually going to space. And so the last thing we're going to talk about tonight are commercial astronauts. And basically, these people are relatively new. The first commercial astronaut got its title in 2004. And since then, only 6 other people have become commercial astronauts. And basically, what a commercial astronaut is when a company, like in this case, Virgin Galactic or Scaled Composites, decides they want to make a spaceship and send up people on those spaceships, but they don't want to get NASA involved. They can train their own astronauts and send them up. And so basically, in order to get designated as an official commercial astronaut, you have to safely go to space and safely return without any major incidents on an FAA licensed vehicle and flight plan. And then once you land, the FAA will give you a certificate and your wings, and you're an astronaut. And so the FAA's definition of space is above about 50 miles. And so, yeah. All right, so there are my sources. So thank you all for coming and watching. Are there any questions at all?
I'm going to go ahead and unmute everybody, so you can just go ahead and talk directly to the host if you like, and I will drop the email if you're interested in a copy of the presentation down in the group chat for you in just a minute. So here, everybody's unmuted. And just go ahead and feel free to ask questions if you have them.
Here, 1 second. Here, 1 second, Michael.
So Dominic, that floor, is it basically just a big air hockey table?
Yes. It is basically just a massive air hockey. The mechanics of how it works is a little different. So in an air hockey table, there's a bunch of air that is shot up through the floor. However, it's more like the air's, they have air push the object up from inside the object. So it's a bit of a reverse. It'd be like if the air hockey pushed itself off the ground instead of the table pushing the air hockey or the puck off the ground.
Ah,
But it is the same principle. Any other questions?
Well, thank you, Dominic, for everything for the presentation. For any of that are interested, the Astronomy Club does send out email updates when big things happen. So if any of you are interested about getting onto that email list, you can visit the Astronomy Club's website. I'll put the link in the chat. It's cwooastro.wixsite.com/central. And so, I need to type that again. I just didn't send it correctly that first time. There we go. So going to that website and scrolling to the bottom of any one of those pages allows you to, there's a subscription form that you can fill in your email, and that will get sent directly to us. So that way we can add you to the list and you can get notified about more of these events, especially in these times where everything has to be virtual. That's going to be your best way of finding out how to be able to participate in these events. And if anyone has any questions, always feel free to ask or send, an email to the physical email that Deanna put into the chat. Other than that, thank you all for participating and have a good night.
I have a quick question. Dom, what's your interest in being an astronaut?
Well, I just one, I think it'd be really cool to be able to go up to space and experience, and go out on a spacewalk and experience the vast openness of space. And, if you turn around with your back to Earth and your back to the station and everything, all you will be able to see is the stars and nothing at all. So I think that'd be a pretty cool thing to do. And also you get to do the coolest experiments up in space.
Were you able to go to space camp as a kid at all?
No.
You can go as an adult.
Not.
It's even more fun as an adult.
Do you know this from experience?
I know this from experience.
Why are we not surprised?
Because we literally gave her a spacesuit.
Yeah, that too. And honestly, I've wanted to go to space ever since I was a little kid because I lived in Florida for a few years when I was really young. So I got to see space shuttle launches before they were discontinued. So ever since I was a little kid watching, the space shuttle launch on the 4th of July.
Oh,
So
pretty cool.
Mm-hmm. Any other questions? Does anyone else want to be an astronaut one day? Or am I the only one here?
yes.
I wouldn't qualify to be an astronaut. I have too many health issues.
I'm going anyways.
Deanna's gonna sneak on. After this meeting, she's gonna fly down to Florida to sneak on to the Dragon capsule with Bob and Doug.
I'll be hanging on to the landing gear of the fin.
Oh, man.
First ever astronaut stowaway.
I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording.